It's been about a week since the TurtleWoW development team has announced the 1.17.2 changes coming to TurtleWoW. The community has been very anxious over some and incredibly excited over other changes, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of the best and worst changes proposed so far according to the community. No more mana starvation, better gameplay for caster classes. Every Shadow Priest, every Boomkin, every Mage is absolutely rejoicing right now that I've talked to so far, because finally new talents are being implemented that would make it much easier to restore mana and mitigate downtime. It opens so many doors for actually playing the game without so much focus on MP5. Priests and Mages restore mana when they wand a target now, built into their talents. Shamans have Mana Shield with new restoration talents to get mana regen when your shield is active. And Balanced Druids not only restore mana on a successful killing blow now, but also can activate Omen of Clarity with spells as well, not just melee attacks. Classes are finally getting tools to combat mana starvation, which allows for more exciting gameplay and an answer to years of issues with casters in vanilla WoW. Although Shamans may still potentially have a problem because their clear casting is only 60%, not 100%, overall, its reception has been greatly appreciated by the casters I've talked to. The destruction of build adaptivity, with Paladins as an example. The new update offers a great deal of changes that will evolve the vanilla experience on TurtleWoW. Many of these incredibly ambitious, showing the passions and considerations of this development team. But there are boons and drawbacks to everything. One of the most discussed changes, and I'll use Retribution Paladin as an example here, but vanilla used to be a sandbox that allowed you to perform multiple PvE or PvP functions regardless of your build. As an example, if you wanted to level as a Retribution Paladin, you could still tank. You could do that all the way up to endgame content. But with the new proposed changes to Retribution, Vengeance will now also reduce the threat you generate. So you can always choose talents other than Vengeance if you wanted to still try to tank while you were being a Retribution Paladin, but it would mean your damage potential while you were solo would be mitigated. Now, we already had some potential tools to deal with increased threat, such as Blessing of Sanctuary, but I think the focus here was on endgame content, and all the content that was leading to it may have potentially been slightly overlooked. So while we're talking about Paladins, one of the biggest gripes with Paladins, and one of the things that they could have adapted to overcome previously that they'll no longer be able to do, is with the removal of Holy Shock's damage, Paladins are now completely empty-handed when it comes to range pulling, and are put in a position where they must face pull or take engineering to throw bombs in order to do range pulls. So whereas before they could have adapted and, maybe I'll play holy and be a healer, or maybe I'll use my skill to be a tank and use Holy Shock to pull mobs back, they no longer have that sort of adaptability, and they're kind of forced into functions or roles where before they were kind of sandboxing to get what they wanted and perform the way they wanted. So the end result is that builds become less adaptable after these changes, as many of the proposed updates, like we were talking about, are heavily endgame focused, and the updated talents will accidentally handicap nuanced functions that we used to be capable of in vanilla. It's especially true for classes that perform multiple functions such as healer, tank, or DPS, or all three. But we will see. The changes are still preliminary and subject to change. Warriors can no longer spam hamstring. One of the biggest community comments regarding Warriors right now is a looming anxiety over the upcoming 6-second cooldown to hamstring. Many in the community are pointing out it's the only tool Warriors had to avoid being kited and killed. This is true, guys. This is true that it is our tool for PvP, but just remember, even though this may be perceived as a negative change, we are getting new tools that will help us. Okay, the way I plan on surviving this update as a warrior main is using Piercing Howl as a mandatory part of my kit. Piercing Howl from the Fury tree will not only slow everyone in an area, it'll slow them by 50%. So if you're worried about slowing enemies down, or maybe a rogue kiting you with crippling poison or a hunter with concussive shot, just remember we do have other tools. You just may have to build your talents out now to be able to get a backup spammable slow tool for PvP. But again, I think a lot of the reason this is happening is because the development team is focused on PvE content, which a lot of it looks very exciting and very good. And again, it's preliminary. Things are still subject to change, but Warriors Cannot Spam Hamstring has been one of the top talked about community topics so far. The Undead's racial ability has been reverted back to overpowered, but the Gnome racial is still 1.5 minutes. In what might be one of the funniest updates we've received so far, the community has been celebrating that the TurtleWoW development team announced they were reverting the changes to the Horde racial because a lot of them were a little heavy, they were a little tough, and much was taken away from players. The developers thought about it a little bit and set back the Horde racials, which has been a great change. We're all super excited about that. We think it was a really good decision. It's really easy to stick to your guns and say, no, we're going to do this. But it shows a lot of character and a lot of consideration for the community when you say, okay, yeah, we hear you. And you know what? We're going to put this back to a place where we think the community likes it. So overall, really great change. Thank you guys so much for doing that, TurtleWoW development team. We're very happy. I'm on the Alliance side, and I'm still celebrating for Horde characters. I do not want you to suffer. But one of the funniest things that has happened from this update, Gnome's Escape Artist was changed to have a longer cooldown, and the Horde racials were set back, but Escape Artist was actually still left in this changed state. So a lot of the Alliance players are really frustrated, especially the Gnomes, that the PvP gap got even larger than it was before. So it's almost like they're like, hey, was somebody working for the Horde on this one? You know, but it's been pretty funny in the chat, in forums, in guild chat. Just talking with the community about the Gnome racial still being set back has been really funny. But again, you know, these details are subject to change, so we'll see if it sticks. In what might be the greatest of any change ever proposed so far, or proposed on this list, the Paladin Blessings moving to 10-minute has been widely celebrated as an excellent update. I personally think it's the best update that they've done of all. It's the most in spirit with vanilla. It's the most obvious win. Everybody is celebrating this change. Paladin Blessings used to be 5 minutes, and then the greater version of those blessings used to be 10. So you were rebuffing constantly, and it was just such a tedious and boring gameplay style for vanilla. It was an oversight in the original vanilla design. The TurtleWoW devs have announced that they're going to change the Paladin Blessings to make them 10 minutes. This is so exciting. This is so exciting for anyone who groups with a Paladin, for anyone who mains a Paladin. This is the best quality of life improvement change on this entire list, in my opinion. And it's hard to believe that it hasn't happened anywhere in a 20-year lifespan of all of vanilla and classic World of Warcraft. So thank you so much, devs, for putting this one in. Good job. Shaman's totems becoming auras instead of imbues. This is both a good and a bad change, and I'll explain why. They used to imbue your weapon with a special effect, and that means you couldn't put poison, you couldn't put sharpening stones or any kind of other imbue on your weapon. So now that they're becoming auras, it means they can stack, so you can have Wind Fury totem placed by one shaman, and then you can have Flame Tongue totem placed by another shaman, and those abilities will stack together for a more powerful effect, meaning there's a purpose to actually use other buffing totems now. Now, Wind Fury is getting a little bit of a nerf here because it's not going to proc as often, but with the other proc chances and the other stacking effects, I believe this kind of had to happen to offset those increased effects. Unfortunately, a minor oversight to this change, as noted by members of the community, is that they could no longer totem twist, or drop one totem buff like Wind Fury, and then drop another wind totem buff like Grace of Air, so that you can stack both buffs on top of each other for that duration. So totem twisting will probably not be a thing if they become auras, and a lot of people are upset about that change, but there's a lot of really positive things being proposed with the aura rather than imbue, and I'm really excited to see it. Tank specialization becoming the new meta. Many people are beginning to take note of the incredible buffs to tanking specializations for paladins, warriors, and druids, especially paladins, and this is both good and bad. First, this is really great because it will organically encourage people to become tanks, which is awesome for the community at large. It may encourage people to take the mantle of tank up more frequently and learn how to tank and grow as a tank, and maybe even learn to love it like many of us have. And it's also bad because the damage potential, and especially the damage mitigation potential of many of the tanking specializations, means they're primed to become very meta for PvP. Some of the other classes are gaining more in the way of damage, but as an example with the Paladin, you can mitigate like 50% or more of damage in PvP while still pumping out some pretty consistent damage. One thing is for sure, regardless, this may be one of the most interesting PvP seasons we will experience in any iteration of World of Warcraft because so many different changes are being implemented. The great part about vanilla is your gear, even if you PvE, even if you raid or PvP, your gear is always viable. And I'm just so excited to see when this change does roll out. It's one of the best times you can ever have of an MMO that has PvP experiences because no new meta is going to be known right off the bat. People are going to be trying things, having new fun, experimenting and adapting in ways they've never done it before. And it's just this sweet spot that creates so much fun content. And I am very much looking forward to experiencing that PvP firsthand. Overall, many of the community's minor gripes, I feel, are balanced by a huge wave of incredibly thoughtful and amazing changes that make this game so much more fun to play, especially on your favorite class. Even some of the major changes which may potentially compromise a lot of players' favorite class identity, like Holy Shockadins, still have to be playtested on launch to determine if it's ultimately good or bad long term. And as we've said many times, I feel it's really important to note here that many of the proposed changes are preliminary and may still change before they're finally rolled out. The TurtleWoW developers have proven that they are incredibly passionate and concerned with the state of the game, and many of the pains the community is expressing right now may be resolved before the final release. I'm hopeful that it will be, and ultimately we'll end up with a greater project at the end. The purpose of these videos is not to negatively critique, but to reflect and discuss as a community the changes that are taking place and provide continued discussion, because the more we discuss, the better the end result will be for everyone involved. The better TurtleWoW's product can be is if we're feeding back as a community in a healthy way, and the more excited we get as a community when we talk about some of the great changes that are coming to the game. And I'm still fully confident and incredibly appreciative of all the work that the TurtleWoW dev team is putting into the game that has impacted our lives so deeply over this 20-year period. I'm very excited to see the end result of this patch and the continued success of the TurtleWoW project. I want to thank you guys so much for the now 1,200 plus growing subscribers in this community, for the conversation, for the support, for the feedback, for the discussion, and for the opportunity. I don't take it lightly. I greatly appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Please let me know what you think, if I missed any of the community topics, or maybe you're part of a sub-community that's talking about changes and some of the bigger changes that you think are coming I didn't talk about. Let me know what you think. I'm excited to have that conversation with you guys. Most of what was included here was what I saw being the most common pain points or common topics in forums, in chat, but I'm excited to hear what you guys think. So thank you so much, guys. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Have a great day.